I cannot believe that this is happening as we have another major Toronto Maple Leafs update, this time surrounding Auston Matthews. And this update is a little bit scary ahead of tonight's game. So we're going to break that down in this episode, as well as discuss Max Pacioretty. He was asked a very interesting question about Auston Matthews, and his response was very encouraging. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, quick reminder, hit the subscribe button. If you're a part of the 70% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. We're on the road to 14,000 subscribers. And we will be live, a reminder, after tonight's game against the Detroit Red Wings for a stream. But, Darius, a lot to go over today, and we have some bad news in the Auston Matthews front. We had an update, and it's not exactly what all of us wanted to hear. So you can see this here, breaking. Auston Matthews is out for tonight's game against Detroit, marking his second consecutive game missed. So there's some other comments as well from Craig Berube and some things like that. I don't think this is going to be an injury that is going to plague the Toronto Maple Leafs months down the line. But in a time where every game matters and you want the Leafs to obviously continue their little momentum they have at this point, it's a little bit interesting that he's out for another game, especially after the they had a lot of days off in between Tuesday and today. So I don't think it's going to be a severe or serious injury, but clearly he was dealing with something before this the injury occurred last game. Prior to last game.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the actual injury. Like, I don't think it's anything serious, and it seems like the organization is not worried about that in terms of the severity of the injury. But obviously, it's something that was nagging him, not just like randomly out of the blue after last Sunday's game. It was something clearly he's been, dealing with the last couple of weeks or games, what have you. And clearly, he needed some time to nurse the injury and get back up to speed. And I just want to put this out there right now that Auston Matthews is their best player. He's the captain. But if he's not 100% in November, let him sit out until he is 100%. There is no use in having him play, especially with their record without him, which is pretty good. And they won last game as well. And I think they're going to do pretty good this weekend, even without him. And again, he is doubtful even for tomorrow night's game against the Montreal Canadiens. They could be without Auston Matthews until well into next week. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on and how this progresses. But head coach Craig Berube did say that, it's looking like it's going in the right direction. So they're not too worried about it. And again, if he's not 100%, it's November. Keep him out of the lineup. Make sure he's feeling good come, next week or a couple of weeks time. Get him back into the lineup. And you don't want to, you don't want to make this injury worse or have something else happen. So, we do know that it's not his wrist, which is encouraging as well. It's something else upper body related, but I'm sure he'll be back soon. And it doesn't seem like it's too serious.
Yeah, Craig Berube came out and said things are going in the right direction now. Whether that means he's going to be back in a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever it takes. Again, the Leafs have actually treaded water very well in his absence, and they have a very good record without him, which we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, ultimately, it's I'm a bit surprised that I don't know. It's unfortunate, but again, the fact that they're keeping him out means they're definitely going to play it on the cautious side, especially given the fact that it's not like he's been super hot to start the season anyway, and whether he's going to contribute that to the injury or his passiveness. We didn't see the exact same Auston Matthews so far this season that we did not only last season when he put up 69 goals, but every other really year since. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with him. And continuing on that note, Max Pacioretty was asked about whether or not they play better without Auston Matthews in the lineup, which whether or not you want to believe into that, it's up to you. But he said, we're talking about the best player in the world here, and he shut all of that down. He said, no, I'm not going to say that. I mean, we're talking about the best player in the world, so you want him in the lineup every night possible, and there's no replacing him. There's a boost when you know that he's in here and doing everything he can to come back and help the team. Maybe that gives you a boost in a sense where it's like, we want to make sure we do right by him. He's our leader. But I mean, once again, we're talking about the best player in the world. It's tough to justify. So a few different things here. He called him the best player in the world like 3 times. So clearly Pacioretty thinks that he is the best player in the NHL, which is very, I guess good. And he is one of the best players in the NHL. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on these comments, as well as the whole thing about Auston Matthews, the team being better when he's not in there. I think it's just a matter of other guys stepping up quick.
I think it's just other players stepping up. I think it's a mental thing. When your best player is not in the lineup, you have to bring your best. You cannot rely on him. He's literally not playing. So I think it's more of that. Pacioretty calling him the best player in the world. I think he's an elite player in the league. He is one of the best players in the NHL, and he leads by example. He is the captain now, and he demands, excellence from everyone. I think he's really, we don't see it, and he doesn't really say it in the media, but I think he's a guy who's really driven and wants to win, honestly. And I think that he's trying really hard. And I don't want to say this is why the injury happened or he hasn't been playing well because the injury happened, because obviously he hasn't been his normal self. But I think he's really driven to impress Craig Berube and want to play Craig Berube's style. And we see it, like even in that game against Minnesota, obviously he was injured in dealing with something because that was the last game he played. And I was, noticing him in puck battles. Like he was very noticeable. So I think he's trying really hard to play the new style. And maybe that's why he got injured. I'm not saying that is, but, could be. But yeah, he is one of the best players in the league. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's good to see Pacioretty, obviously a veteran guy, give Matthews his praise and back him up, and obviously shut down this a little bit of a ridiculous question, or at least in the frame that the Leafs are better without Matthews. They play very good when he's out there, but that's because they're a very deep team, and that's something that Craig Berube spoke about on their depth. Like I said, we need everybody to contribute offensively. We can't just rely on 3 or 4 guys. We need everybody to produce a little bit and do their job. And obviously, we're talking about all these guys that the Leafs have and the decisions they have to make on a daily basis between Bobby McMahon, Pontus Holmberg, now with Cal Yarncroc and Connor Dewar coming back, specifically Connor Dewar, most notably and most recently when he comes back. It's interesting because the depth that they have allows them to kind of float a little bit. And I saw some comments in the video, I think it was yesterday, where people saying the Leafs aren't super deep. They have a lot of decent guys. I think they have a pretty deep team in the sense of they have a lot of guys who can step up in absence of other players, whether they have injuries of Auston Matthews or even other injuries down the line. Their depth, which like Craig Berube speaks here, has shown this season a little bit, but it can also be a detriment as well. So it's a two-sided sword here.
Yeah, at times. I think, sometimes with the Leafs, when the top 4 guys aren't going, it's a little bit of a disaster. But I'm going to bring up the Winnipeg Jets for a second because they're 13-1-0 on the season. And every single game, it hasn't been the same guys stepping up. It's been something else. If the offense and defense is not going, it's Connor Hellebuck. If the offense is not going, the defense is scoring. You know what? They're finding a lot of ways to win. And with the Leafs, I think they have potential to do that. With this current lineup, it just isn't working. But I think the potential is there. Like you have a guy like Nick Robertson who's not scoring yet this year, and I keep bringing him up. But once he gets scoring, like in a depth role, he doesn't have to score 50 goals. But once he gets scoring, that helps. Max Domi hasn't scored yet, right? So there's a couple guys there. I think there's potential for it to be taken to another level. But at times it is true. If the top 4 guys aren't scoring, they're in a little bit of trouble. And I think they're trying to get away from that philosophy because I feel like with Sheldon Keefe in the last couple of years, he relied too heavily on those guys. And if they weren't going, it was a bit of a disaster. So I think they have the potential with the depth here.
Yeah, and ultimately it's going to be their depth that's going to propel them to hopefully 2 wins this weekend against the Detroit Red Wings. And of course, after that, a big game. Hopefully they get their revenge on the Montreal Canadiens. One other note as well is that you were right, Darius. Anthony Stolarz is the projected starter tonight against the Detroit Red Wings, meaning that Joseph Woll will factor into the game tomorrow against the Montreal Canadiens, which is an interesting test for him. He's been a bit rough to start the year, so this is going to be a big test for him on Saturday. But Stolarz gets the nod tonight. It should be a game the Leafs take care of. But any final thoughts before I wrap up? It's Stolarz who gets the nod in tonight's game.
Yeah, usually in the OHL, like my time in the OHL, no matter who you played, you could have been playing a team that was 0-20-1 on the season in the first half of a back-to-back or a 3-3 weekend. You always play your starter. You always guarantee a win when your team is rested the first game. So I feel like that's kind of what they're going with here with Stolarz and tonight. And Montreal, they haven't been playing great, so Joseph Woll can take on that game and hopefully he can build some confidence up. And it's going to be good to see both goaltenders this weekend.
Yeah, let us know down below what your thoughts are. And again, we'll be live after tonight's game, so make sure to tune into that. See you guys later.